Very interesting report, and it is indeed a new world order that's proposed. Don't get me wrong, I'm no more impressed by Chinese military hardware than I am by NATO military hardware, but it does seem like we are in a new Cold War, doesn't it? The sooner that Cold War becomes one of détente and talks about arms reductions, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But that's where we are at the moment on the international stage. Now I'm going to do a quick pivot to domestic issues and bring onto the stage both investigative journalist, my good friend Jacqui Deevoy, and her colleague, the filmmaker Richie Brown. Richie, if you could look slightly over your right shoulder, you'd be looking at the camera a bit more, because at the moment you're looking, it's as if you're looking out the window. That's it. There we go. That's the direction you want to look. Okay, so right. So on with the second part of the show. Welcome to Ascending Order with me, Basil Valentine. I'm thrilled that you could join me. It seems like the whole of the UK, if not the entire world, certainly the sort of Anglosphere countries and Europe are still heavily traumatized by the COVID farrago. It seems like a bad dream. Nobody really wants to go there. Nobody wants to talk about it or think about it. All kinds of terrible things happened. Large number of suicides because people went out of business. People were deprived from seeing their loved ones in their last few moments. And of course, the subject of your film, Unseen, the truth about the death protocols. So first of all, Jacqui, we're going to play the trailer for the film in a minute, but give us the premise and what motivated you to make this film.
Well, it's kind of an update in a way, although it does cover it from start to finish, on the whole subject of involuntary euthanasia, which I discovered was going on back in 2020 in the care homes and the hospitals, and in some hospices as well. And a couple of people in their own homes were involuntarily euthanized, which is a euphemism for murdered, in their own homes. So this was something that caught my attention back in 2020, made the first film in 2021, A Good Death, with Iconic Media, made a second film last year called Playing God, which we crowdfunded. And then this is kind of an update really, but it does cover it, as I said, from start to finish, including a lot of the history of what's gone on and how it's affected people right up until 2025.
First of all, then, let's have a look at the trailer for the film, and you can see this on YouTube. Here we go. This is Unseen.
In 2020, as the world grappled with a global health crisis, a shadow fell over Britain's elderly and vulnerable. It was a harrowing story of betrayal and loss. Allegations have emerged that those in power, the bourgeoisie, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and their lackeys in Parliament waged a calculated assault on the weakest members of society. Care homes and hospitals, once places of refuge and healing, were reported to have become sites of unimaginable horror, where families were denied access to their loved ones and controversial medical protocols led to countless deaths. The Scottish COVID inquiry opened some people's eyes to the scale of these events, exposing what some believe to be a deliberate effort by a complicit media to obscure the truth. Reports of withheld food and water, the use of powerful sedatives like midazolam and morphine, and the blanket imposition of do not resuscitate orders paint a chilling picture.
Because that's just give my mom palliative care medicine, I'm getting used charged with my event house to my mom. But we won't know that. We won't know how to do anything.
These murders didn't take place in isolation, but in context of a giant population pyramid with an aging population. Rising pension liabilities, economic pressures, and a colossal national debt with a rotten economic mode of production incapable of solving these issues without a mass culling or a mass rearmament for war. One question remains. If the government claimed to prioritise protecting the elderly in 2020, why and how were protocols like NG163 and NG191, alleged to have hastened thousands of deaths, implemented? And now, with the passing of the assisted dying bill, has the narrative shifted from safeguarding our elderly and disabled loved ones to deeming them a burden? Britain in 2025 shows the decadence and wanton disregard for human life characteristic of a neo-fascist character. This is Unseen, the truth behind the death protocols. In this documentary, investigative journalist Jacqui Deevoy and me, filmmaker Richie Brown, follow the stories of 8 families devastated by these state-sanctioned protocols where politicians, doctors and nurses were empowered to decide who should live and who should die. Despite the Scottish COVID inquiry receiving scant attention, even from alternative media, the testimonies we heard compelled us to shine a light on a very dark chapter in Britain's history, a chapter marked by moral decay and a chilling disregard for human life. Join us as we uncover the truth behind these protocols and confront the uncomfortable questions they raise.
The shielding of vulnerable people and the elderly, who are the most affected by this virus, that is in our plan.
Basically, and I think that's why it's very difficult for me to get over it.
She got morphine and midazolam. It's the first, even asking the question, first time I'd known about the use of midazolam. I realised I'd actually let it happen on my watch, and I'd gone in to stop it and still never stopped it.
I think the midazolam and morphine was a massive factor because I feel like even with the ventilator.
So did you know she'd been put?
Yes, yeah, they put her on that. They said she was 76, she's coming to the end of her life. And my mum was nothing like it. She had nothing wrong with her at all. She was as fit as me. And the only thing she was doing was grieving my dad.
Has been told that Matt Hancock wanted the ultimate say on who should live and who should die.
Really chilling stuff in there, Jacqui. Matt Hancock wanted the ultimate say on who should live and who should die. And also very revealing that the population pyramid with an aging population and a mass cull may have been behind that agenda.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're known about this aging population for decades, so this is something they've been preparing for, and you see it in their documents. Operation Lockstep, where they describe in detail basically the COVID pandemic, but that document was released in 2010, and then you had all their pandemic exercises leading up to this, from Event 201 to the Cladex exercise in 2018 to what was the other one, Atlantic Storm in like 2011, I'm going to say. And then you had even Operation Dark Winter, which was back in 2001.
So how many people in all do you think had their lives ended prematurely? I mean, we heard from that chap there in the trailer, his mother was 76, and he was told that she was coming to the end of her life. The Beatles drummer, Ringo Starr, is 80.
Yeah, a lot of the people we interviewed and that I've interviewed over the last 5 years, their loved ones have been a lot younger. I set up a support group in 2021 just to keep everyone that I was interviewing in one place for films and stuff and articles. And in that group, the loved one of the youngest in victims are 21, 28, 17. There's none in their 30s, a couple in their 40s. Several in their 50s, lots in their 60s, and then 70s, 80s, and 90s. But yeah, as young as 17, the victims have been. This was a grandmother who joined the group, but she hasn't really been interacting that much because she can't tell the rest of the family what she knows. So she's just kept a very low profile. And this happens a lot. The 28-year-old is a lovely girl, American girl. I had her mum Rebecca on my show when I was doing a show for Unity News Network. Then there's several people that we've spoken to with relatives who were extremely young when they died, when they were killed on these deathly protocols. So here in this country, the NG163 protocol was brought in 2020, April 2020. That was reviewed. Matt Hancock gave it to a panel of doctors and professors to review it. Dr. Sam Ahmadzi, who was one of the best known palliative care specialists in the world, actually wrote a report on this for the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, which is still available. I just had a look yesterday to see if it's still available, and it is online. In this, he says that he and the other panel, the rest of the panel, said that this protocol, NG163, was extremely dangerous and would kill people. So Matt Hancock said, thank you very much, and implemented it anyway. And that was in place for some time. And this is the initial guideline, NICE guideline, that was actually killing people, because it was almost identical to the Liverpool Care Pathway, which was abolished in 2014 and which we think was snuck in under this new name of NG163 through the back door and used on so-called COVID patients. So people coming in with anything that vaguely presented as a respiratory issue, and sometimes not. In some cases, they were just going in with some other minor ailment. One lady went in because she felt a bit dizzy. Next day, she was dead. So there are lots and lots of stories like this. I've literally spoken to probably over 1,000 families now in the last 5 years, and I've got nearly 200 of them in the support group now, all willing to speak out. I've been trying to get their stories published for the last 4.5 years. No one's interested. That's why we've made these films. That's why I made the first one. That's why I made the second one. And that's why we made this one, because 5 years on, it's still not being addressed by the mainstream media. And all the editors I speak to, they are sick of the sight and sound of me, to be honest, because every so often I'm saying, are you ready to run that story yet? They just ignore me now. But I'm not going to, I am a dog with a bone. I'm not going to give up. So yeah, that's sort of what's happened.
I'm very pleased to hear it, Jacqui. Now, what does this death protocol actually consist of in terms of, let's say I had presented myself with a runny nose, admitted to hospital back in 2020 or something, and it had been decided that in my late 50s, mid 50s, I needed to be put on an end of life pathway. Who was making that decision, and then what would have happened to me next?
They didn't call it an end-of-life pathway. It was a COVID protocol, but it was an end-of-life pathway disguised as such. So you'd go in, they'd put you on NG163 if they thought you had COVID. A lot of people weren't even tested. Not that the tests worked anyway, but a lot of people were just put on this protocol. It's like, because they needed to get the numbers up. Remember, this was the very early days when they needed to scare the pants off people, as Matt Hancock admitted to. So the more people they could kill in hospitals and care homes. And this is very interesting as well, because very, very few so-called COVID deaths happened in people's homes. They were always happening in hospitals and care homes and hospices under these protocols. So if COVID really existed and really was a terrible, dangerous killer virus, people would be dropping dead in the streets, in the supermarkets, at the railway station, and in their own homes. And that wasn't happening. So that said a lot. People were being herded into hospitals and care homes. No visitors were allowed. There was no one to advocate for them or care for them or stand up for them. And they were literally being bumped off. And you mentioned a number. I did an article based around Wilson's size research into the UK numbers of people who were killed under this protocol. And it was the headline article in the Light a few months ago, actually back in March, I think. And he put it at 55,000, but we know it's way more than that. They're just the ones that have been recorded. Sorry, I'm waffling on a bit there, Richie. You might
no, not at all.
Yeah,
Richie, go on.
Yeah, go for it. So there was also NG191, which they recommended using the failed drug remdesivir. And it's quite interesting that the World Health Organization had an article up saying that this remdesivir drug does not treat COVID at all. And they put that up at the time. However, they quickly took that page down, so you can only access it via archive.org and the Wayback Machine, where they've archived that web page. But if you read it, it says this does not work. But we do know that remdesivir causes liver and kidney failure. That's why it killed so many people in the early trials when it was used for Ebola in Africa. And they sought to bring that back because Anthony Fauci had the patents for that. It's the same people that were involved in the HIV/AIDS scam, where they basically gave AZT, this cell terminating drug, to people that they so-called had AIDS, because they were using the same PCR test to test for HIV as they eventually did for COVID. And the inventor of the PCR, what's his name, Carrie Mullis, said that you should never use this as a diagnostic. So we're using this faulty tool to diagnose so-called COVID cases, and then at the same time we're bumping people off in hospitals on a care pathway. And I was reading one of the other documents, NG 165. So that was one of the documents between NG 163 and NG 191. And in that they wanted to treat pneumonia differently. They weren't prescribing antibiotics, like a simple antibiotic for pneumonia. So if you got pneumonia and you went in and they determined that you had COVID pneumonia as opposed to normal pneumonia, you wouldn't get antibiotics and you would probably die of pneumonia. So they used many different ways. I mean, we've discussed this quite a lot, like midazolam and morphine, ventilators, like putting you on a ventilator, which is a whole ordeal in itself. If you go on a ventilator, you don't have, for starters, it's quite an extreme thing because you don't have much of a survival rate to begin with. If you take remdesivir, you're going to have liver and kidney failure. So, I mean, I'm sure people remember those articles saying that COVID causes liver and kidney failure, but no, it wasn't that. It was the drug that they were giving them under NG 191.
Yeah, they kept shifting the goalposts when it came to the symptoms. You know, I don't know if you remember all the ridiculous things that they were coming up with. You know, these drugs were causing terrible failures in the body. You know, organs shutting down, like you said, the liver, the kidneys. They were caused these drugs as well. Midazolam, which is a benzodiazepine. If you use a benzodiazepine with an opioid such as morphine, which they were doing, and it actually, you can see on our film there was a little highlighted bit of the NG 163 document which says, you know, this is saying to the nurses who are administering these drugs, you may notice, you know, that this causes terrible issues with breathing. And if you notice this, just ignore it and carry on, basically. That's it. That's what it was actually saying. And so they were told, yeah, when these drugs are used together, any nurse or doctor would know that it depresses respiration to the point where it actually stops. So it starts off with, say you're at the point where you're doing 30 breaths a minute. Within a short period of time, that'll become 20 breaths a minute, 10 breaths a minute, 5 breaths a minute. And then if you keep administering the drug, which they were doing through syringe drivers, which continuously pump the drug into the body, if you don't stop that at some point, the breathing is eventually going to completely subside and stop, and then you're dead. And this is what they're doing. And these two drugs are known, especially when they're used concomitantly, to cause death, basically. They use these drugs in a cocktail for execution in some states in America. In several states, they've been withdrawn because it's considered too barbaric. It's been said that death row prisoners have said they'd rather die in the electric chair than by lethal injection because it's absolutely a most terrible, agonizing death. And being electrocuted in the chair is somehow better because they know people that have gone through it and seen it. So, but that's the combination of drugs that they're using on our elderly and vulnerable people in care homes and hospitals back then. It's still going on. I'm getting reports from people, I'd say on a weekly basis now, but back in 2020 and 2021, just hundreds it was happening all over. And it was only when I first spoke out about it on, I think I spoke to David Icke about it on one of his podcasts, because he'd been looking into it as well. And once we did that, a lot of people started coming forward because a lot of people don't want to believe it. They're thinking, well, the NHS wouldn't do that. You know, they wouldn't hurt us. They're there to heal us and cure us. They're not going to give us drugs that kill us. But I think a lot of people now have woken up to the fact that they don't want us to live. They either want us as customers forever, or if you're old and costing them too much money, like a lot of elderly and very sick people do, terminally ill people, they deem it better for these people to not exist anymore.
Yes, the Bill Gates death panels. But where did these orders and new protocols first originate, Richie? Have you been able to uncover that in the film? I'm always looking for the kernel of evil, as it were. who gave the orders as well as those who followed them.
Yeah, so the NICE governance is managed. They set it up as like an external so-called external organization, presumably so they could fob off the blame to it and then abolish it when this is all uncovered.
So NICE is National Institutes for Clinical Excellence or something, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. And but no, it reports directly back to the health secretary. So the people responsible for this at the time was the Tory government. They instituted these protocols, and you had to follow them on pain of being fired by the hospital administrators. So I mean, the buck stops there. I mean, I think there's a whole another element of kind of the psychopathy of some of the nurses and doctors involved in this, where they just seem to have a complete disregard for human life. I mean, I said to you last time that in our society at the moment, doctors and scientists are basically white collar criminals that deserve prison. And I think there's quite a lot to be said for that, because if you watch our documentary, you'll see some of the absolute, completely detached psychopathy going on. Yeah, I mean, Jacqui has an incredible story about skin and trying to harvest someone's skin.
I think I mentioned that to you, Basil. One of the ladies in my group, as soon as her husband was killed, literally seconds later, she was asked, "Can we have his skin?" She said she could not understand, she couldn't comprehend that they were actually saying that to her. She thought she was imagining things, and she said, "I'm sorry." And they said, "He's got lovely skin, we can use that." And she was like, this was literally seconds after the man had been killed. So there are some terrible horror stories, and I'm putting a lot of them in a book. There's so many that we couldn't fit them all in the 3 documentaries so far. I mean, this documentary we've had the most, I think, is it 8 or 9 or 10? Anyway, there's a lot in this one, whereas there's only been 5 or 6 in previous ones. So I've put together a book. It's about to be published. Mark Atwood is actually publishing it for us with through his publishing company, which is great. And it's over 30 stories at the moment. We're just doing the final edit from people from my group telling their stories. But I could fill 10 books, easily.
Trauma-based mind control is the term that comes to mind in terms of getting doctors to behave in ways that are antithetical to the Hippocratic Oath. It seems like a crisis of sufficient magnitude was synthesized back in those days, that it caused people to behave in irrational ways. Who wants to take that?
There's definitely a huge element of that. There was a lot of the behavior was driven by fear. A lot of people believed, that what was going on, that there was a killer virus on the loose and that we're all going to die, So people were acting with that in mind. When it comes to the psychopathic actions of some of the doctors and nurses, I found it really hard to believe that these were our normal doctors and nurses. So, most doctors and nurses are fantastic. They've got a vocation to help people and cure and heal people and look after people. But we were faced with this new breed of nurse and new breed of doctor that didn't seem to be anything like the ones we were used to. And I've heard the same story over and over from so many people about nurses who won't look them in the eye, don't even speak sometimes. They don't have name badges on. They were unfriendly, cold, robotic, and even sadistic. So some of the things that I've heard that nurses said to the families of these people that were being euthanized are quite horrendous and unbelievable. But when you experience this, and when you've had that happen to you, these things stick in your mind. You never forget. You remember every single word. You remember every single minute of what happened, and which made me wonder, where have these weird nurses come from? Where have these nasty medics? Where do they get them? And a few of the people I've spoken to, when they tried to track down these medics to report them, they've disappeared. They don't seem to exist. So were they brought in? And Richie's got some ideas on this. What do you think, Richie?
Yeah, so Ken McCarthy appears in the documentary, and he makes the following point, that a lot of the nurses and doctors were just sort of waived during the COVID era. So previously, if you had got a doctorate, say, for example, in Africa or South America or even Europe, and you went to America, you would start right at the bottom. You had to redo your certifications, but they waived that during that period. So all these people were working in ICU units or emergency units that never have worked in a emergency unit before. Their doctorate with medicine may have been something completely different, like with pediatrics, with children, or whatever. And they were all working in these, and then following these protocols, and then being surprised that people are dying, like coming away really shocked that we put 10 people on ventilators and COVID's really killed them. So there was that element to it. There was also the element that if you're bringing in a huge migration force to work in your hospitals, their visas are tied to their job. So if they lose their job, they're likely that they're out of there. They're out of the country. So there's kind of a double coercion going on from the hospital administrators and from the fact that they'll lose their visa if they lose their job. And then so you have all these people working. I mean, there's an example in Unseen where Deborah recounts that the person that checked in her partner was also the doctor, the same name. And it's like so it's quite, you can see how they did it and how they managed to do it for all that, because if you have a whole migration workforce that is basically at the beck and call of the hospital administrators as well as their visas, they're going to do whatever. It's very troubling.
Finally, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Tell us about the film, guys, where people can see it, and how you made it. Richie.
Yeah, so you can see it. Yeah, you can see it on YouTube. We do have a crowdfunder for it, so please feel free to donate for that, as we didn't get paid for it. So that'd be excellent if you could. You can see it on YouTube. We've got the other interviews up on YouTube as well. And yeah, we spent a couple of weekends just driving up around the country and interviewing these people and getting their stories. I definitely advise you to watch it. It's quite harrowing, so brace yourself for that.
And last word, Jacqui, any chance of any accountability for these deaths?
I hope so. I mean, quite a few people are starting to go legal, but as we all know, that can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, and you're up against the NHS and you're up against the government. So not many people are able to actually take that step and go legal, but there are cases going on in the background. I've been attending an inquest since March this year. We did a week in March, then we did a week in the middle of August, and it was suspended in very suspicious sort of circumstances, and it's going to be resumed in December. So we don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. We don't know whether people will be held accountable. I hope so, but if someone is held accountable for this one particular death, then the floodgates will open, and a lot of people will be stepping forward, possibly hundreds of thousands, saying this happened to a member of my family as well.
Perhaps then the story will get the coverage it deserves, and indeed your film. Thank you. Jacqui Deevoy and Richie Brown, thank you so much for joining me today on Ascending Order here on Unprecedented TV. If you've joined the show late, do go back and watch the rest. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more geopolitics, presenting the news that you don't see on the BBC. My own special news edit daily here on Unprecedented TV. But for now, it's bye from me, Basil Valentine, and see you all again tomorrow. Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV.